This is the Extra Point Podcast from Arizona's family.
It's about that time. About time for the Cardinals to hit the practice field out in Glendale. NFL training camp is almost here, so let's get a scouting report from the man who I think has been. How many years have you been covering Arizona Cardinal football now, Darren, from azcardinals.com?
Well, total, I've been covering them since the 2000 season, and then I've been with the team since 2007. So it's been quite a few years. So this would be season number 24, maybe, I think.
Man, that's you get like a silver anniversary at 25, right? We got to start planning the party, right?
Well, we'll have to see how that goes. I don't know how many of those left out in the media that remember that far back are, to be honest.
Well, it's you're a must-read on social media, azcardinals.com. Recently had a chance to chat with Kyler. We were all over that one and just, kind of waiting for – I have your tweets, the alerts come up whenever you – just know that whenever you were working, I am excited to see what's coming out of the Cardinal headquarters. As you go into this season – is this for me? And this is I've been here since 2006. I have more questions about this team than I've ever had about the Cardinal team. How do you feel going into the season?
I think that's a fair assessment of where this team is right now, and that's on a couple of different levels, Mark. I mean, number one, with a new coaching staff, especially coaching staff that has worked pretty hard to keep things close to the vest in terms of, what their offense is going to look like, what their defense is going to look like, who's going to be in the starting lineup, those kinds of things, where I think, though, when you don't know those things, it's going to leave a lot of questions. So we start with that, just the newness of the coaching staff and that. Then you get to the roster, which, let's face it, is in the middle of a reset, let's say, with Monty Ossenfort trying to rebuild this roster from where it was. And that has led us to a lot of questions about a number of positions. Not all of them, but with a number of them. And I was just writing up my top questions going into camp. I got two parts of that running later this week on azcardinals.com. And there's a couple of positions where you just don't know. You don't know who's going to be the starters, who's going to be the backups, or who even are going to make the roster in a couple of cases. So when you have that much of wide openness, if that can be used as a word, with the roster, that's just not usual, I would think, at this point in the year. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people are going to be interested in watching training camp and exactly how this is going to unfold.
Well, and the biggest question, of course, is the quarterback position and Kyler Murray and the knee injury and missed the rest of the season. And as you look at, can he come back? And you've had a chance to talk to him and see him over there. Should he come back? First of all, when you watch him walk around, how does he look?
I mean, he walks around fairly normally at this point when I've seen him around. But again, walking around and playing quarterback in an NFL football game is two totally different things. It's funny. You mentioned, you kind of said, should he come back? I don't. For me, there is no question about that. I mean, I think for Kyler's sake, for the team's sake, for Jonathan Gannon's sake, Monty Ossenfort, he has to play this year. Now, when that is, I don't know. But I don't buy into this whole thing where maybe he has to take the whole year off. That doesn't make any sense to me for anybody involved here. So I do expect him to be back on the field. Now, when that is, whether we're 4 games in, whether we're 8 games in, I don't know. I know this. I've covered this league for a long time, as we previously talked about. I've seen a lot of guys coming back from ACL injuries, and it's a lot. Even from the year 2000 when I started, coming back from an ACL tear is a lot different than it is now. But one, Kyler Murray also had some meniscus damage. That adds to the length of him in terms of rehab. And then I rarely find guys that, they get cleared to play, but just because you're cleared to play and you can go out on the field and play doesn't mean you're going to be playing at the level that you're accustomed to or that the fans are accustomed to. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu is a great example. He wrecked his knee in multiple ligaments in 2013, was not the same player in 2014, had a fantastic 2015 until the end of the year when he tore his ACL again. and then struggled a bit in 2016. And then was trying to get back to that level in 2017, and all that was happening. And it's one of the reasons he ended up not being around here. Now, he eventually got back to a Pro Bowl level. But when you relate this, and every guy is different, I think expectations need to be managed for Kyler Murray, for both himself and from the fan base, because this is a very serious injury and it's tough to come back from.
Well, and you mentioned not taking the year off, and I think fans look at the roster and don't know what to expect and think, okay, let's take a mulligan, first-year head coach, first-year GM, and root for the Texans to lose every game and try to get the first and second pick in next year's draft. But I would argue, from watching a lot of losing around here over the past 15 years I've been here, that losing, once it gets inside your building, inside your water, it's hard to get it out. So as you are around the building and can sense, the expectations for this team, Jonathan Gannon said he doesn't want to rebuild. On the outside, it looks like a rebuild. What sort of intensity do you feel like we'll see day one out there in training camp, and the messaging coming from the organization, the coaching staff?
Well, see, to me, Mark, those are two different issues here. One, I think the intensity, I think the message is going to be, we're going out there to win football games. It doesn't do anybody any good on this roster or this coaching staff to lose games. And that's ultimately the issue you have with this whole tanking or getting a better draft pick or whatever. The players involved aren't helped by that. They want to play as well as they humanly can, not only because they want to win games, but they want to show that they're good players. Same with the coaches. So no one's going out there to lose football games, and that's just not going to happen. So the messaging is going to be, we're going to win some of these games. And I do think the mentality right now is in a good place for that to happen. Now, whether it does or not, when the games start counting, we will have to see. But they're not going into this thinking that this year is a wash. I mean, that doesn't happen. Now, when you talk about the intensity of training camp itself, it's funny you bring that up. I think Jonathan Gannon has a plan with how he wants this to be, but I'm very curious to see how this plays out. When training camp has been brought up to him in the past already, he talked about, even last year in Philadelphia when he was not in charge, and people questioning how hard the Eagles were running their training camp and whether it was hard enough to get them ready for the season. And obviously they made it all the way to the Super Bowl. And I see a team here that has hired for the first time a director of sports performance. It's got a whole new strength and conditioning staff. There's like 7 guys that now are working in that area. The whole analytics part of conditioning and keeping guys in the right place physically is a booming kind of thing in the NFL right now. So, would I be shocked if this isn't like some 180 from Cliff Kingsbury and they're not out there banging heads all the time? No, I mean, I don't think that's where the NFL is going. I don't think that's where practices are going. But that doesn't mean that Jonathan Gannon is seeing this year as a write-off. I think it's just how they think you need to approach today's athlete and today's NFL player.
Do you have an odds-on favorite for who will line up under center? We assume the quarterback will be under center, maybe a little bit of the time, on opening day for the Cardinals.
I don't have any reason to believe it's not going to be Colt McCoy. I know there's a lot of conversations about, do you put Clayton Tune out there? I think Clayton Tune's going to get a long look-see in the preseason, as well he should. But he was a 5th-round draft pick for a reason. And the idea that he would be ready to go the very first week of – sometimes teams are hesitant to put a top 10 quarterback out there under center in week 1 of their rookie year. And we're talking about a 5th-round pick. So I would expect Colt McCoy to be the starter initially. Now, again, I don't know how any of this is going to go. I don't know how Clayton Tune's going to perform in training camp. I don't know how Colt McCoy is going to perform in training camp. I don't know what ultimately is going to be the timeline of Kyler Murray and how that might impact how they look at things. And by the way, I don't think any of us are going to have an idea of Kyler Murray and his timeline, because I think Jonathan Gannon is going to want to make sure that nobody knows it. The rest of the teams don't know it. Nobody knows it. I think Kyler is going to be told, or would believe anyways, that, hey, we're not going to talk about any timelines. So I think that's going to be a big mystery as we get into the season.
As you have talked to Kyler and seen Kyler, how do you feel like the injury has impacted his mentality?
I think, I happened to run into his father early, like before he even had the surgery. So the season was still going on last year. And his dad told me that he thought that this was adversity that Kyler was going to be able to benefit from. And subsequently, we've heard similar things from Kyler in flight planning and talking in these episodes. And, he basically said, look, you have to take it as a positive, because there's no room to make it a negative. He's got to take it as a positive. He's got to take it as, okay, how can I bounce back from this? I think he made it clear with some of his comments that I think he's happy that there's been some changes in terms of the coaches and the front office. And he even said, I kind of feel free right now, which is an interesting comment considering he's coming off a major, major injury. But I think he also understands that this is a fresh start and it's important for him. But now that change has happened, there's going to be an increased focus again, once he comes back, of how he's going to perform and how people are looking at him, because there were a lot of questions over how Cliff Kingsbury and he got along and how Cliff Kingsbury was running this team. Well, now you've got a second person in here now trying to do those things. And I think that puts more pressure on the quarterback now that he's got to change there. And now can he perform in this different setting?
When you look at the offense, and then I guess that you could call it maybe a new offense they're going to run, what sort of clues do you think we'll get during training camp if Kyler isn't out there or is out there in a limited capacity, to kind of figure out what this offense will look like when he is healthy?
Well, I let me just start there. I think you're going to have a really hard time seeing that. I think what's going to end up happening is Kyler is going to start on the physically unable to perform list. And if you're on that list, you are unable to take the field with your teammates. You can go and work out one-on-one with a trainer and do some football-related activities one-on-one, but you can't do any practice stuff. And I would be really surprised if he was not on PUP to start the start camp. Now, can he come off that? Yes. Max Williams was on PUP to start training camp last year. He eventually was brought off of that so he could start practicing, and maybe that'll happen. But if you get to the point, and I'm kind of backing into your question here, if you get to the point where you feel fairly certain that Kyler Murray is not going to be ready anytime in the first month of the season, and if you stay on PUP when the season begins, you have to miss at least 4 games, we're not going to see him at all on a practice situation. So we won't know exactly what that means. So when it comes to what this offense is going to look like with Kyler, I think you're going to have a hard time, because you're not going to get any sense like that. Now, I don't think it's going to change dramatically when Kyler is in there, because I think that's what they're kind of aiming for. I don't think they want to have some Kyler offense and then non-Kyler offense. And so I think we'll get a sense of what they want to do. The question is going to be, once Kyler gets back on the practice field, how comfortable he is going to be under center, how much will they put him under center compared to how it used to be, and where they go from there.
When you take a DeAndre Hopkins off his team and away from this offense, is this the James Conner show? Do you feel like when you look at the offensive line, where did you put that in your questions? And we don't want to give away your whole article before it drops here, but your questions about the Cardinals heading into camp.
Well, I mean, I think we've heard from a couple of offensive linemen talking about how they expect to run the ball more, and even James Conner mentioned it. So clearly that's a thought process. Now, again, saying before you even get to training camp, okay, we're going to run the ball more, and then having it actually come to fruition in regular season games. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, including what your injury status is, who you're matching up with, how the game plays out, all those things. But, do I think they would like to do that some more often? Yes. Do I think they're going to try and do that a lot more often than maybe Cliff Kingsbury's offense did? Yes, I do think that. And I do think James Conner is a key part of this. He actually had a pretty solid season last year, averaging 4.3 yards a carry. And, can they give him the workload more, and can they grind out more yards? I think that would be the hope. I mean, maybe this is the first year James Conner gains 1,000 yards rushing in a season, which he has yet to do in his career. I think having that balance on offense is always good. But again, you've got to be in a position in games where you can afford to continue to do that and not fall too far behind in games where you got to throw the ball. Now, without DeAndre Hopkins, passing to me is still the most important part of 2023 NFL football. And you've got to be able to pass the ball to win. Hollywood Brown is going into a contract year. He's going to want to prove that he can be a number one receiver. We've seen and heard good things about rookie Michael Wilson, but can he do it when the lights are on? Can Rondale Moore stay healthy? I mean, there's a lot of questions over this receiving core, who they might be able to throw at a tight end whenever Zach Ertz comes back, what Trey McBride comes into. And again, this all goes back to the original stuff we were talking about, Mark, which is there are a lot of questions going on with this team. And this training camp is just going to be so fascinating to see who's getting the main reps, who's working with the first team, and kind of how they want this all to unfold.
Did you total it up for your article there? The biggest questions. Do you have more questions on offense or defense going into training camp?
Usually, I try and break it up. It's a 2-part article series, and I usually have 5 offensive questions and 5 defensive questions. I mean, I'm sure you could go in a different direction. I mean, I think for me, in terms of important questions, I think defense holds more of those because you have a lot less certainty in terms of who's going to be your main pass rushers, who's going to play defensive line, how comfortable is Zaven Collins going to be on an outside linebacker? What are you doing with Isaiah Simmons? What's Budda Baker's thought process right now? I mean, I think overall there are probably more significant defensive questions than offensive questions right now, but that doesn't mean there aren't plenty of offensive questions too.
And Budda has always been a very thoughtful guy, and I get exactly where he is and the price that he's paid for this organization and how he feels, and I get contracts too, and how the NFL works. So how do you feel like he approaches this? How big of a distraction you think this will be come training camp?
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to Budda. I don't get the sense Budda Baker is the kind of guy that would let something like this be a huge distraction to him. If he gets on the field and starts practicing, if he gets in games and starts playing games, he only knows one way to play. And I don't see him being a guy that would let this impact that. Now, off the field, or, whether he has issues and shows up, but he's like, maybe I'm going to hold in because I want this contract figured out. I can't speak to that right now. I think that's going to be fascinating to watch. But it reminds me a little like back in the day, David Johnson was waiting for a new contract, and David Johnson's personality was it just didn't work for him to, be the bad guy. And maybe Budda is different, but I don't know if he really has that in him. I think he's an awful big team guy. And I'm not saying one way or the other. I mean, he's got to do what he thinks is best for his career. And I don't blame guys when they get in these positions. But I also don't blame the teams when they have their stances either. So, I mean, I am a guy, maybe I've heard it too many times over the years, Mark. This is a business. It's a business for both sides. So I don't get really ruffled one way or the other because both sides are doing it for reasons that they think are right.
No, I totally agree, and I think I totally understand where each side is coming from, and it's you just wish that the organization, there could just be some sort of springboard here into training camp where you could say, okay, let's out with the old, in with the new. But I feel like some of the stuff is just kind of hanging around, and especially with the Kyler injury, until you see him on the field, you can't really turn the page. The new uniforms will help, but and the new uniforms, all the new players, all the rookies. Is there any of them that you're looking to pop here? Who intrigues you the most out of the draft class?
I think we mentioned Michael Wilson at receiver. I think he'll have an opportunity to get some playing time. I think Paris Johnson's going to be in the starting lineup on the offensive line. And I don't know what B.J. Ojolari's situation is, a second-round outside linebacker. He missed the entire offseason with injury, and I don't know how healthy he is. And they still got to get him signed. I don't fear that that's going to happen, but so I don't know how much he would play right out of the gate. But honestly, with the way their roster is, the rookies have some real opportunities to make dents in terms of playing time. Maybe John Gaines makes some kind of push to be a rookie starting center. Maybe Garrett Williams is back and can make, by the end of training camp, make some dents in terms of getting playing time at cornerback as the 3rd round pick, because cornerback's wide open. We mentioned Ojulari, we mentioned Paris Johnson. Can Keitrell Clark, again, cornerback, he's a 6th round guy, but can he get in there? We mentioned Toon. I think the entire draft class will be something to watch, because the way this roster is and the way this depth chart is, and with a new coaching staff, I think there is a lot of opportunity for all of these draft picks, if they play well enough, to make some inroads in terms of playing time right out of the gate.
Have you put pencil to paper yet as far as roadmap this season? When do you come up with a prediction?
I mean, it's really tough. The Kyler thing is the toughest thing. I'm curious to know, again, if he stays on PUP, if he's on PUP to begin with, which I'm expecting, if he stays on PUP when we get to the final cut downs, and if you're on the physically unable to perform list when the year starts, not only you have to miss 4 games, but it saves the team a roster spot while you're on PUP. So if he's on PUP, then he's going to miss at least a month, probably a little bit more. That gives you a better idea of where Kyler might be. If he's not on PUP, when the regular season starts, that's going to speed up everybody's mindset a little bit. So that'll be something to watch. The rookies, everybody's at their own pace, and it's good that they had off-season work and all that. But again, whether you want to talk about it being underwear football like Gannon was talking about, or Bruce Arians used to talk about guys are playing soccer or whatever, you just don't get a sense of football playing yet. And until I see that, it's really, really difficult to see where the rookies might be. But I repeat that if you had a team that was figured to be challenging for the division this year, the rookies are going to have a lot less chance to be in there. That's just natural. I think with the way this team is right now, I think these draftees and rookies are going to have a real chance to get playing time sooner rather than later. Now, whether that's week 1, I don't know. But all things being equal, if you get a draft pick and another guy who's been in the league 2 or 3 years and it's pretty close, and you see upside of that rookie, I'm letting the rookie play, because it makes sense in this situation.
It looks like you get a trip to Minnesota in August to beat the Heat. Any other games you have circled this year of stadiums maybe you haven't been to yet, or places you're looking forward to going?
Well, God bless you, Mark, to talk about stadiums that I haven't been to without really thinking about the fact that I've been doing this for 20-some years. I have been to all the stadiums at least once at this point. It's funny you talk about beating the Heat in Minnesota. It'll, obviously right now it's brutal around here, but I don't know, Minnesota in late August with the humidity, I don't know how much better that's necessarily going to be. So we'll see about that. I'm fascinated with the later part of the schedule for a couple of reasons. One, that's you're likely to have Kyler Murray back, and I think that's going to be the biggest storyline of the year when he comes back and how he plays when he is back. And then you look at some of those later season games. I mean, they go to Cleveland in November. They go to Pittsburgh and Chicago and Philadelphia in December. Those are some real cold weather games, potential cold weather games. And it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. But, again, for me, it's going to be less about the opponent, especially early on, and more about what this team looks like under Jonathan Gannon and this coaching staff, who they have playing, not only what Kyler's timeline is, but what players end up winning jobs in this lineup early on, and what kind of impression they can make.
Yeah, we need to get you some sort of endorsement deal with a coat by December. We should work on that. Get you something on Instagram there. Final question is as you get ready to kind of unleash the coverage here, what can we look for you? So you have your article dropping on the top 10 questions about camp, flight plans on YouTube. What other Cardinals coverage? How are you kind of unleashing the I guess the flight plan, if you will, for training camp
of the camp. It's going to be interesting. I'm still kind of mapping out exactly how the stories are going to come out. I think the schedule is going to be a little bit different with Jonathan Gannon. We're going to have a lot more afternoon practices. Cliff Kingsbury liked going first thing in the morning. These guys are going to be practicing in the afternoon a little bit more. It's going to be fascinating because the Cardinals are only out at the stadium through the first preseason game. And then the week between the first preseason game and the week in Minnesota, the team is actually going to come back here for training camp for about for that week before the second preseason game. So I think they can iron out some of what the logistics are going to look like in the regular season only during training camp. So that's going to be interesting, especially with the heat of trying to do a week of practices here. And then in terms of coverage, I've got a new writer on board, Zach Gershman, who's going to be writing with me at training camp. We're going to have all the normal video coverage and highlights as we go along. Obviously, the first couple of weeks, there's going to be a lot of open practices. The fans can come out, get your free digital tickets now for that. And then, of course, we're going to be working on a new season of Folk Tales. We got some of those in the works right now in terms of getting those together. Which I think will have some good stories, including Larry Fitzgerald's epic playoff run in 2008. So we got a lot of good coverage. Go to azcardinals.com, go to our YouTube page, of course, our social channels. We're going to have a lot of stuff. It's a kind of a new beginning with the coaches and the GM. And, however it plays out in terms of wins and losses, I think there's going to be a lot of fascinating stories this year.
I'll look forward to it. And if you need the shot, John Gustafson, our sports photographer, nailed that Larry mad dash. So I'm right by the archive room. We've got stuff going back to the first year they were here. So happy.
I may take you up on that, Mark. So if you're going to offer, I may take you up.
All right, just come. Yeah, next time we'll have you come in studio, and then we can go dig around in there and pull up. We found Camp T from 1991 the other day. Well, hey, thanks so much for the time. Look forward to seeing you out at camp, and stay cool out there.
I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Extra Point Podcast is a production of 3TV, CBS5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.